How's it going, everybody? Ed Ricker here, out at the field, and this is part 2 of the beginner's guide to the Mavic 2, getting started from unboxing all the way to your first flight. So this tutorial is going to cover the first flight. It's going to cover a little bit of calibration and setup and some of the more intricate menu options during flight. If you want to see how we first unpackaged the drone and got it set up at the house with firmware updates and the initial calibrations, check out part 1. Now right here I've got my cell phone that I'm going to be using for my display device. I have the Mavic 2 controller and I have the Mavic 2 Pro right here folded up with no propellers yet. So even though we're using the Mavic 2 Pro, this tutorial also applies to the Mavic 2 Zoom. The bodies are identical. The only difference is the cameras. So with these tutorials, I'm just going through the initial setup with the drone body itself. So let's go ahead and connect the phone to the controller and put our props on. The props are pretty simple. First of all, let's unfold the drone. You'll see 2 of the motors have these white markings on the edge, whereas 2 motors do not. And each pair is going to be diagonal from each other. Well, if you look at your propellers, you're going to find that some have a center white ring and some do not. So those propellers coincide with those motors. Essentially, you just push it on and then twist the way that is indicated on the propeller. You can store the drone with the propellers on. Of course, these propellers fold back nice and neat like that. But when you take it back out to the field and you still have your propellers on, you want to make sure that you spread those propellers back out. Now this tutorial is going to start with your phone already in the remote. We've already been through that process with part 1. And now we're going to turn on the remote controller first, which is pressing once on the power button and then again and hold it. You'll hear a little chime and it says connecting. And that's the proper procedure, is to start with your remote and then go on to the drone. So we're going to do the same thing with the drone. Oh, first of all, take off your gimbal clamp like we did in part 1 as well. There we go. Now we can turn on the drone. So press the power button once and then again and hold it and set it on a level surface and let it go through its calibration. It's going to twitch a little bit. The gimbal's going to flop back and forth a little bit. That's all normal. It's at this point that I'm going to log into my DJI Go 4 app. So I'm going to go hit start flight right here on the app. Now before we take off, you see aircraft status. It's one of the first menus that comes up here. It says compass calibrate. We're going to calibrate the compass. Hit calibrate and hit start. All right, so what it's asking us to do is to pick up the drone, and it's safe because we're not going to hit any launch or any takeoff functions here. And it wants us to rotate the aircraft 360 degrees horizontally. So we're going to rotate around the drone as we do that, just like that. Now it's asking us to rotate it 360 degrees vertically. So we're going to do that as well. Our body is rotating around the drone's not rotating around our body. And we have a successful compass calibration right there. What the compass does is it orients the drone so that it knows which way it's pointing, north, south, east, west. If it didn't have a compass, then it would at least know where it was, in relation to a location with GPS. It just may not know which way it's actually pointing. Now at the top of the app, you want to make sure that it says ready to go GPS. That means that we have signal to the GPS satellites. We're going to check one more time on our sensors to make sure that they are on. We're going to go up to the top row of the icons in the app and select the sensor icon, visual navigation settings. Make sure that we have enabled the visual obstacle avoidance. Right now we only have forward and backward obstacle avoidance available. That's because we're not shooting in tripod mode or active track just yet. There are 2 ways to take off. First of all, you can press the takeoff button right there on the left of the app and then slide to take off. And it's up. And it's going to hover there until we tell it to do something else. The beeping is because it is sensing my body right behind it. So that's obstacle avoidance in action. Now I'm going to throttle down using my left thumbstick down. There we go. Now that's the most basic and simple way to take off and land. But there's another way, and this is the way that I usually take off and land. So left thumbstick down to the left, right thumbstick down to the right. That starts the prop spinning. and they're going to spin there until we tell it to do something else. So you can make sure that everything sounds good, looks good, the props are all oriented properly. And then with your left thumbstick, that's your throttle, throttling up. There we go. We did the exact same thing, we just did it in a manual way. All right, let's go through a few flight motions here real quick. So as I said earlier, the throttle is the left thumbstick in mode 2. And mode 2 is the way that we set it up originally when we first set up the drone in part 1. So throttling up will cause the drone to rise up. Pressing the thumbstick down will cause it to descend. With the same thumbstick, we can press it left, and that's a yaw, yawing left, and there's a guy throwing a frisbee. And then yawing right is pressing that thumbstick to the right. Now let's get up a little higher. And I'm going to raise it to a safe height above the trees, which I would say would be about, let's say 120 feet. Now I'm going to press with my right thumbstick up, which is moving the drone forward. So we're now traveling forward about 10 miles an hour, and then moving that thumbstick down will move the drone backward. Moving that thumbstick left will move the drone to the left through space, and vice versa. To the right moves it to the right. Now on the left shoulder of the remote control you have this dial, and that is going to lower our gimbal, our camera gimbal, or raise our camera gimbal depending on which way you roll it back and forth. Now on the right of the app is where you can take pictures and change from photo mode to video mode. So the photo to video toggle switch, or toggle button I should say, is right here, and you can switch back and forth. That's picture mode, and that's video mode. It also indicates that we're shooting in 4K at 30 frames per second, and our SD card has a capacity of 1 hour and 20 minutes. I'm going to hit the start record button. Alternatively, you can hit the record button here and the picture button here. This rocker right here is going to raise or lower our shutter speed, and so that's going to darken or brighten our image. It also does a few other things, but for the most part right now, that's its immediate effect. Another thing you can do is tap to focus on the screen to make sure that you have correct focus on whatever subject or object that you are flying near or over. On the top of the app you can see 1338, and that's dropping pretty quick depending on what I'm doing with the drone. That's how much time I have left on the battery, and the closer it gets to the left side of the screen, it's about halfway to the H, the little yellow H icon. And that means that you only have enough battery in order to return back to where you launched it, back to the home point. We're stopped recording. We're going to go to our camera settings and make sure that we have our white balance correctly set. So in the middle of the camera settings, on the top you see the camera icon. Tap that and then go to white balance and make sure that we have our white balance set appropriately. You could use an auto white balance if you want to, but I prefer to, whenever I can, select the appropriate white balance for the weather or the condition. So right now it's sunny. I'm going to select sunny. Now this is also where you can select different styles, different formats, different camera coding. All right, so we're at 4K, 30 frames per second. I'm going to go ahead and do a few motions here, a few movements. Start moving forward with my right thumbstick. So pressing up with my right thumbstick. And then I'm going to camera tilt down just a little bit with my left index finger. And now tilt back up with my left index finger. Ease back a little bit on the moving forward. Yaw left with my left thumb. Now I'm going to pitch up with the camera. And I'm going to yaw right just a little bit. And then move forward over these trees. Now I'm going to yaw right as soon as I pass by the trees. And we see the rest of the field. camera tilt up just a little bit, and then stop. It's important to know that if you get in trouble or something happens, you're having trouble controlling the drone, don't panic, just let up off the controls. Because see, it stopped right there. I didn't have to do anything. If you have a trouble like controlling the drone or something happens, just let up off the sticks. Then the drone will hover automatically, it won't do anything. So that's always something to remember. If you get in trouble, just let up off it. We're getting down there with the battery. We're only at 29% left. So what I think I want to do is go ahead and do a return to home. So we took off right here. The drone should remember that. And what I'm going to do is pan this down a little bit. So the return to home button is right here. I'm going to press and hold return to home. And aircraft is returning to the home point. Remember, in part 1, we set our return to home altitude at 60 meters, which is about 198 feet apparently. So here it's coming back, and this is a completely automated process. I'm going to back up just a little bit because it's supposed to land right about here. I'm going to tilt the camera down so we can see just where exactly it's coming. All right, so it looks like it's going to miss the concrete. That's all right. The grass is short enough that it's no big deal. So a couple feet. All right, my battery's getting low, so I'm going to go ahead and power off the drone by pressing the battery button once and then again and hold it until it completely shuts off, and then grasp the battery with these 2 buttons on the side and pull up. And there's my FAA certification, by the way. Now, if the gimbal sensitivity is too high, like I think mine is, we can adjust it a little bit, but there is a really cool thing you can do in the app. If you press the screen and hold it, you can drag your thumb or your finger and it will move the camera independent of the drone body. It's really great to move the gimbal independent of the drone itself. And here's what it looks like. Now the buttons on the back of the remote control are obviously customizable, but the left button default is if you press it, you can return your gimbal back to center horizon. So if you've been messing around with your gimbal and it's all over the place, press that button and whoosh. If your gimbal is still a little bit too sensitive, go ahead and go into your gimbal settings. So to get there, we'll press the 3 dots in the corner of the app, go to the camera icon at the bottom, go to advanced settings, and we're going to raise our smoothness and decrease our pitch speed. So pitch speed, let's go down to like 15. And let's raise our smoothness to 25. How about that? Now let's try our camera pitching. Yeah, much smoother and doesn't stop so abruptly. That is very nice. Yeah, I like this motion a lot better. If we go into the camera settings and go to the little shutter icon there, we can go into manual, and now we can adjust our ISO, which should be as far down as it can go because it's daytime right now. Our aperture, which could be a little bit higher because we're overexposed, maybe a 4.5. And then we can use histogram, which is a professional exposure finding tool in the gear icon there, histogram. Let's turn that on. And histogram shows up at the bottom of the app. We can drag it to where we want it. I made a video about using a histogram, but that's how you find it in the app. And go ahead and search my video about histograms if you'd like to learn more. Now let's start recording again, and let's try and find our best exposure with our aperture. Let's go down maybe 5.6, maybe even lower, maybe 6.3. So now we're kind of getting a sun flare because the sun is setting. We turn our drone a little bit using yaw, our left thumbstick to the right. And now over here, it looks like it might be a little underexposed. Well, actually, you know, it might be okay. Actually, that looks pretty nice. Yeah. Now, the skyline over here looks a little overexposed. I'm going to bring this down to 7.1. Now, there are neutral density filters that are available. I don't have them yet. They're actually sold out when I was trying to buy them from DJI.com. But there are a couple other suppliers like Polar Pro, Freewell Gear, Skyreet that make ND filters or neutral density filters, which is going to help darken your image without having to raise your aperture or raise your shutter speed. So I'm at f8.0, shutter speed 1/60th second, ISO 100, We'll go a little higher here and just maybe head toward the skyline, see what we got. Now it says that we have weak transmitter signal, and I'm willing to bet it's because of those trees. If you look, I'm shooting over here way past the trees, and so I get a weak image transmission because my line of sight is now kind of going through those trees, even though I'm 273 feet up. So my choices are to either raise the drone a little bit, then I can regain that line of sight, or just get closer to the drone, maybe drive over there and then keep flying, you know, because we can't necessarily go higher than 400 feet in the United States because of the FAA rules and regulations. By the way, if you lose your bearings and you're not sure exactly where you're supposed to come back home, you can use your lower left portion of the app there, and you can see a green line that heads back to where you first took off. So you can see the drone orientation, and as you turn the drone left and right, that's the compass in action. It knows exactly where it is, and it knows what the orientation of the drone is in relation to that green line. Now on the right side of the controller, you see T, P, and S. P is the normal positioning mode, T is the tripod mode, and S is sport mode. T is the tripod mode and basically kind of deadens all the sticks, and the drone moves much, much slower, on the order of like 2 or 3 miles per hour. So flicking it in tripod mode not only slows down the drone's movement so you can get some more controlled shots, maybe some cinematic pans or movement around with the drone. So not only does that, it also turns on all the obstacle avoidance. The obstacle avoidance is not always turned on all around the drone. The side sensors are actually off in normal positioning mode. In tripod mode though, they do turn on. Sport mode is pretty much the opposite of tripod mode. All the sensors are turned off and you have the maximum RPM of those motors. So you can get some really crazy speed with this drone. And like I said, again, no obstacle avoidance when you're using the sport mode. The drone is much faster and you can get up to the max speed that this thing is built at. So let's see, I'm just mashing forward and I'm getting up to 42, 43, 44, almost 45, 44, 45. Yep, that's 45 miles per hour right there. Switching to positioning mode also gives us some more options on the left. You see that we have our intelligent flight modes. So we have normal, we have our hyperlapse, our quick shot, active track, point of interest, tap to fly, and cinematic modes. So not quite as many modes as the DJI Mavic 2 Zoom, but still quite a few things to play with here. I'm not going to go through most of these, but quick shot is available. Unfortunately, we don't have that dolly zoom that the Mavic 2 Zoom does, but we have asteroid, boomerang, and some of the other DJI quick shots that are available. Right now, we're going to go to active track because that's one of my favorites. The Mavic 2 does this really, really well. It already recognizes me with this little green dot. It recognizes my camera, and occasionally it'll even recognize my bag over here as an object it could follow. So I'm going to go ahead and start recording and tap myself, and it's locked onto me. Now all I have to do is just walk toward it. And I'm not touching the controls. This is doing all the work. I'm gonna just walk around, and it's got me. Very well, I might add. Now right below me you see that there is a circle that can be dragged left or right. So if I drag that to the left, 46%, now it's orbiting around me in that direction at 46% speed. And I can start walking and it's still going to follow me and still maintain that orbit. Now if you're ever having an issue and you see this thing heading for a tree in an intelligent flight mode, just hit the pause button on the remote control. It'll stop it dead in its tracks. We also have our hyperlapse function. And I'm gonna go ahead and set that. I'm gonna raise the drone up and we're going to get to where the sun is right there. All right, and we're going to use course lock. So if I press course lock, I can select my video length. Let's do 10 seconds as a final video length for this hyperlapse. And interval 2 seconds, that works. I'm also going to turn the drone this way and then set my direction as that direction. I've locked my direction on that course. Now I'm going to turn back toward the sun, just like that, and then hit go. And the drone is going to move left about a mile per hour for 8 minutes and 20 seconds. And I'm gonna have to make sure this is good to go. I'm just gonna let that run. I'm gonna monitor it here. And that's gonna be the ending shot of this video, is this hyperlapse as the sun starts going down. But thank you so much for watching, guys. Also check edrickard.com for a list of all the drone DJI gear that I use to create my videos, as well as video gear in general. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and until next time, happy flying.